what do I think about that in regards specifically to the United States and the US dollar and the Trump administration? He wants to let this thing run hot. This is what they're doing. He is going to get Jerome Powell out next year. He wants to lower rates to what, 1.5? He's going to ignite a firestorm.
Yeah.
And that is going to unleash a liquidity wave that we're maybe not really prepared for, number one. Number two, what I'd say is in the United States specifically, but the rest of the world is about the same boat. In the U.S., we're running $2 trillion deficits, right? We're spending $2 trillion more than we're bringing in, an incredible amount. When we think about recessions and we think about liquidity drying up, a lot of times people go back to, what about the 1940s and the 1970s and 2008? We're in a different regime today. At the point, as Ledn would say, in fiscal dominance, the markets are being driven by the Fed. It's policy, right? It's policy per the secretary, the Treasury Secretary, to now let this thing rip. That's the policy. And so if you understand that the fiscal spending is what's driving the markets, then I would almost think that the only way we get a recession, liquidity drying up, is by choice, by policy choice. They have to change the policy to now restrict it again. And I just don't see that happening.
Yeah. And I wanted to ask you too, because you're talking about the Fed, Mark, on X these last couple of weeks, Trump has been extremely vocal about Powell, and so has the Bitcoin Senator Lummis. I had the pleasure of being able to speak to Caitlin Long a couple weeks ago, and she was basically making the case that they're not acting in a neutral fashion; they're acting political. So what is your thoughts on that, man? Like, because, the Fed is supposed to be this independent entity. It's supposed to stay out of politics. But I think the last, I would say 3 years since really the beginning of Operation Choke Point 2.0, it has clearly shown that it is not a neutral institution. It's a politically motivated institution. I understand where they're coming from, what the incentives would be for them to make those types of decisions, but it's a little bit unprecedented, wouldn't you say?
Before I was a Bitcoiner, I was a gold bug. And I was standing behind Ron Paul, figuratively chanting "in the Fed." And I'm here for it. I'm in Bitcoin because I want to separate money and state. But of course, ending the Fed. But when I think about separating money from state, what I'm saying is I want to take away the state's ability to print money.
Yes.
Of course, the state's always going to need money, which is why I don't care if they use Bitcoin. I want to take away their ability to create money. But I also understand that getting rid of the Fed today would be disastrous. You can't just do that today. It's a process that we have to go through. And kind of going back to the Fed that we have today and being politically motivated, I think it's always politically motivated because the government has policies. And so the Fed is supposed to help accommodate those policies. So it's always somewhat politically motivated. We are seeing it seemingly extremely motivated today. And really, this is Trump's MO. If you go back to his first term, he constantly harped on the Federal Reserve to lower rates, lower rates, lower rates. He's a real estate guy. He understands the benefit of having low rates. And so today he's been very abusive, verbally abusive to Jerome Powell, who he calls him too late, right? And all these other nicknames that he has. And so Jerome Powell, probably to your point with the Operation Choke Point, has been overly political, in favor of the Biden administration. And potentially maybe even still being somewhat, maybe working against the Trump administration, if you will, when it seems like he should be more accommodative right now. So maybe Jerome Powell is being politically motivated to not work with the Trump administration, but then you would also say, well, Trump is also trying to replace the Fed chair to work with his political favor. So, I wouldn't say it's unprecedented to answer your question, Nico. I think it's always been politically motivated. Each of these administrations have their own set of policies they're trying to enact. The Biden administration apparently was trying to shut down cryptocurrency and our freedom to transact. And the Trump administration wants to open that back up. But yeah, it's not unprecedented.
So do you think it's possible, because I think all Bitcoiners want this, Mark, and I'm so glad that someone like yourself, of your stature, your success, is basically you're aligned with what Bitcoiners want, which is the separation of money and state. And we don't want that just for political reasons. We want that because we inherently know that as long as the state has the ability to print money, it's going to continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And then that inevitably encroaches on freedom, right? And I
Yep.
think that's what a lot of the symptoms that we've been seeing over the last, 10, 20, 30 years is because of this Frankenstein administrative state that continues to grow. Unelected bureaucrats that are accounted to nobody, that stay in office, keep their jobs regardless of who's in power. But if you look at the root cause of that, it's the money printer, right? And this
Hmm.
is the reason as to why Bitcoiners want this end goal. My question to you is that possible? And the reason I'm asking you that is because now that we've seen essentially the proliferation of stablecoins worldwide, specifically in developing countries, and now stablecoins being some of the, I'm not going to mention specific ones, but being some of the largest buyers of US treasuries, doesn't that continue the fiat system and like kind of continue this, the yeah, continue money and state being, coming hand in hand?
A lot of Bitcoiners may not like to hear this, but I do believe that Bitcoin extends the runway for the fiat monetary system. So to
Mm.
answer your question, not just stablecoins, yes, stablecoins, but stablecoins are fiat, but Bitcoin as well. And so I just did a video talking about this, and if I made the case that I believe both Trump and Besant want Bitcoin to rip way higher than most people can even fathom, way higher than those numbers I just gave you. And the reason why they want those numbers to rip is the same reason why it extends the dollar's life. Well, I should say they want it to rip so it can extend the dollar's life. So what do I mean by that? You're well aware, I'm sure most of your listeners are, that all governments, especially the United States, is stuck in a debt doom loop, right? The rate at just covering the interest, which is why Trump wants the rates down, just covering the interest alone is unattainable for them. And so we're in this debt doom loop. And so we have debt to GDP is over 100%, and they need to get the debt to GDP down. Now, as I said earlier, both Trump and Besant have said, hey, the only way out is to grow our way out. So they need inflation to run hot to bring the growth up, the GDP up, and they can change the ratio. Well, the Stablecoin Act, the Genius Act, is potentially one tool they can do that, which extends the dollar's runway, I think, and its dominance to the point that you're making. And so what they can do is right now we have banks are sitting on $3.5 trillion, or 3.3 today, of what we call sterilized reserves. These are reserves that the Federal Reserve gave the banks, but they didn't, and through QE, but they didn't want them to spend them in the economy because of inflation. And so they're sitting there, and the Fed pays them IOR, interest on reserves. Per the stablecoin, this Genius Act, it looks like the banks are now going to be able to create stablecoins off of the $3.3 trillion they have in reserves and put that money right into the street, which creates inflation. Now, it does two things. One, it exerts the dollar's dominance across the world as a medium of exchange, and that's point number one. But it's also going to preserve the dollar because the dollar is being inflated away. In order to keep the bond market active, the Treasury needs to sell more treasuries. And if people don't buy them, then they have to buy them themselves, right? So if you think about what is Scott Bessent's job, sell treasuries. That's his main job. I got to sell the treasuries. So through getting stablecoins to the hands of the people across the world and then making the stablecoin people buy treasuries, he's effectively selling treasuries, number one. But number two, we also need to let the economy rip and grow. So we need that inflation. We need that money, that $3.3 trillion, to hit the street, not stay with the banks. So if the banks can light up the stablecoins, which is what the stablecoin bill, the Genius Act, gives them, they can push that right to the street and cause the inflation for the growth. Okay, well, that takes care of that problem, and that's what we call financial repression. Let inflation run hot, keep yields low. All right, but that creates another problem. So now we get in the growth that we need. We have the financial repression, but if we have a lot of inflation, people are going to be unhappy, right? Okay, so what they do is they need to have a release valve. The release valve is assets. So you see the cost of gas and food going up, but you also feel a little bit richer because your assets went up as well. Okay, so that works. But the problem is if home prices and stock prices go up too much, then people are still pissed because the millennials and, et cetera, they're priced out of the market. right? There's no hope. There's no future for you. So here's where Bitcoin comes into play. Bitcoin is the most sensitive asset to global liquidity. It's a liquidity sponge. When global liquidity goes up, gold goes up by about 1.4 times sensitivity. Bitcoin goes up at 8.9 times sensitivity.
Oh, wow.
So it soaks up more liquidity than anything else. And so what I believe the Trump administration, Bessent, Ledn, et cetera, want is for gold and Bitcoin to rip and soak up the majority of that liquidity so that inflation isn't really felt. If Bitcoin rips to 500,000, that takes hundreds of billions of dollars of buying pressure out of the market. That'd be pushing up other asset prices. So now they get the cake and they can eat it too. They get the buyers of the treasuries through the stablecoins. They get the banks to issue the stablecoins to the street, unlocking the $3.3 trillion, creating the inflation they need to let the economy grow. But instead of getting inflation across all these assets where people can't afford it anymore, it all goes to Bitcoin and gold. And why do I think that? Well, number one, they've laid the groundwork for that. But let's look even a little bit deeper. Howard Lutnick is the Secretary of Commerce in the Trump administration. Before he became president, he spoke at Nashville at the Bitcoin conference. We were both there. And he announced through his fund, Cantor Fitzgerald, which is OG heavyweight Wall Street, fund, very connected, top floor of the World Trade Center. There's a whole lot going on there. I'm not going to get into all that. He announced a $2 billion credit line for Bitcoin. Then his firm, Cantor Fitzgerald, took, I believe, the biggest investment in MicroStrategy and Tether. It's connecting a web here. So I'm unlocking the liquidity for Bitcoin, $2 billion, plus I'm going to buy MicroStrategy and Tether. Okay. Now he's in the Trump administration pushing an SBR and a sovereign wealth fund. Interesting. Now his son has now taken the torch, and his son has now launched, I believe, 2 SPACs, Bitcoin SPACs, right? He just did one with Adam Back. He also did the one with Jack Mallers, right? So now they're launching more Bitcoin funds. And then over on this side, you have Trump, almost himself, controlling interest of DJT Media, bought $2 billion worth of Bitcoin. It almost looks like they're front running what they know is coming, Nico. Or am I just crazy?
No, you're not crazy at all. It's so funny. We actually did an episode on this exact theory about the front running 2 days ago. And now you're saying the exact same thing. So yes, it 100% looks like it. And this is coming right on the verge of the report that they just announced it's going to come out July 30th, which is, we don't know what's in that report, right? And then simultaneously on Truth Social, Trump is posting videos. Basically, this is the best Bitcoin explanation I've ever seen.
Yeah,
and
right.
Howard Lutnick was going on Pomp's podcast and basically saying, listen, I'm going to buy $10 million worth of this thing, then $100 million worth of this thing. And all those people are in, they're in the cabinet. They're in positions of power. They're in positions of influence.
Yeah.
So I completely agree. And Trump has a history of doing this, Mark. I remember that tweet or that Truth Social post. It was the beginning of this year where he was like, make sure to buy, it's going to be a good week. And then he changed the announcement on the tariff, and then equities pumped like 20-30%.
Yep.
So it's all there. I don't think this is speculation. I think you're just connecting the dots, bro.
Yeah. But you also the mechanics of why they want Bitcoin to go so much higher. And it's interesting because I always thought the U.S. would be the last to come around because they have the most to lose, as the dollar is the reserve currency of the world and it's threatened by Bitcoin. But now all of a sudden I see it in a way where this would actually preserve the dollar. It can exert its dominance through stablecoins, and then by soaking up the inflation, it can allow the dollar to continue for much longer. And then they get fabulously rich because they front run it. It's all coming together.
Need liquidity without having to sell your Bitcoin? For more than 6 years now, Ledn has been the trusted choice for Bitcoin-backed lending with transparency, security, and trust at their core. I absolutely love these guys, and I personally not only have an account with them, but also a loan. And some of the key features that I love about Ledn is the fact that there are no monthly payments. you pay at the end of the term. You also have the ability to roll over the loan as well, and you can pay it back whenever you want. Essentially, what they do is that they help their clients unlock the liquidity of their BTC, allowing you to HODL while still accessing the wealth of your Bitcoin. They've been battle tested with their focus on transparency, security, and trust, allowing them to build a proven track record of client success and security, helping tens of thousands of clients harness the value of their digital assets with confidence and peace of mind. Learn more about what your BTC can do for you today. Simply Bitcoin viewers get 0.25% off their first loan by using the link in the video/podcast description. What are you waiting for? Head over to Ledn.io today.